retired Major General Ravi, who's a highly decorated officer with a Param Vishish Seva Medal and an Ati Vishish Seva Medal, who served as General Officer Commanding for the Karnataka and Kerala area from 2022 to 24. With 37 years of distinguished military service, he's commanded key operations across diverse terrains and held pivotal roles including as defense and military attaché at Washington, D.C. His exemplary career culminated in his retirement in June 2024. Thank you, sir.
Right, the organizers, the fellow speakers on the dais, representatives of companies and organizations, both corporate and if government present here, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and Jai Hind. It's indeed a distinct privilege to be asked to speak to such a distinguished audience on a subject of both topical and enduring interest, and that is one of development and preservation of organization culture and motivation of personnel and employees. And this is something which we are grappling with on a daily basis, and I feel happy to be having this platform to share my views with you. And for that I thank Akhilesh Kapoor, TACT India, for asking me to speak on this. So first and foremost, make no mistake, we live in an extremely dynamic and complex world. Nothing is simple. And many of these conditions change so rapidly and they interact in manners which are extremely complex that we are unable to see its manifestations outwardly, and nor are we able to understand how they interact with each other internally. So as organizations, the criticality is that they need to be swift in adapting to changing conditions, exactly as the previous speaker said, that change, it reminds me of one of these taglines earlier, I forget which company it was, which said, change is part of our plan. So unless companies are extremely agile, nimble, and swift in catering and adapting to these changes, then they lose their competitiveness and they start falling from where they are. And interestingly, in my time in 1982, if I remember correctly, there was a book by Ralph Peters, In Pursuit of Excellence. And it was widely read. It was a New York Times bestseller list for so many years. In that, he was a management guru, and that he had posited that, in fact, he had drawn a list of 43 global companies. And using data and subjective assessment, he had rank ordered them, and he said, this is the acme of excellence. Exactly 2 years later, 1984, Business Week came out with a headline, oops, who's excellent now? Because of those 43 companies, 20 were on the verge of bankruptcy. In 1960s and 70s, 8 of the top 10 companies globally in the beginning of this century were no longer in the top 500. That is how fast things change. And just to survive and be profitable is not good enough. You require to be excellent in what we do. Every organization needs to be excellent in what we do. In case for longevity, that is a critical requirement. And organization, towards this organization culture is the secret sauce. Ultimately, how organizations function is based on the culture. Exactly as individuals are defined by their habits, organizations are defined by their routines. And the routines, the best of organizations understand the importance of routines. And the worst of organizations care two hoots about it, and when they stop succeeding or they start failing, they are surprised by that. So in terms of those routines which an organization follows consistently is what leads to organization culture. And this is something which we see that happening on a daily basis. If I'm not wrong, in the recent trial of that cryptocurrencies, Sam Brinkman, when he was questioned in the US system, one of his statements was, nobody advised me on what I was doing wrong. He was heading a billion-dollar company. And he said, my advisors didn't advise me on what was going wrong. And which was staring in our face that this is common sense. Right? So that is how important cultures are. In the army, we have a word for organization culture, which is regimentation. So we pick people from diverse parts of the country, coming from diverse backgrounds, languages, various kinds of operating. As they grew up, they operated in different setups. But we groom them through an orientation process that they are all pulling in the same direction. They have the same common touch points. We specifically put in place guardrails in terms of their functional behavior. And by the time you finish that period of grooming, you have an extremely close-knit and cohesive organization. That is exactly the word for organization culture in the army is replaced by this aspect of regimentation. And that is exactly which most organizations need to follow formally as an institutionalized system. So, there is a mythical episode which is quoted often in most articles which are written on culture. John F. Kennedy, before they put a man on moon, when John F. Kennedy visited NASA, I believe in the corridor, he met a janitor cleaning the corridor. And so he peered at his name and he then asked him, Tim or Alan or whatever. So, Tim, what do you do here? So I believe Tim replies, I'm helping to put a man on moon. So it doesn't matter what job he was doing. He had bought into the culture of that organization that this is our endeavor, to put somebody on moon. And I'm playing a part. It may be a small part, but it is definitely a part in this whole endeavor of putting somebody on moon. So if organizations have this kind of a culture, it is absolutely guaranteed that they not only survive, they thrive. So there is the other, normally when they have the same organization, I still remember reading some time ago on a Gallup poll as to which is the company most young people would like to work for. This was some years ago. And the name which came up globally, was Bridgewater Associates. Bridgewater Associates, headed by a person called Ray Dalio, who's written multiple books again, in the same category as the previous speaker. And so they asked, as to this is a company which handles funds worth $170 billion. Their revenue in 2010-2011 was higher than the revenue of Google, Yahoo, Amazon combined. So in terms of functionality and in terms of performance, they were beating everybody. So Ray Dalio had framed, he's the founder of the company, had framed 200 operating principles for Bridgewater Associates. And not one of them dealt with money or finance. Not a single, it's open, it's on the internet. Not a single operating principle dealt with the core functioning of the company. It dealt with culture. It dealt with character. It dealt with philosophy. It dealt with something like if a new employee comes into our organization, it takes us 18 months to change his old habit and instill new habits. So they had quantified the time taken in transition. That is the amount of details it went into. So that is what is extremely important when we talk about developing cultures. And cultures need to be developed proactively. Cultures need to be developed deliberately as per a plan. Because if you don't do that, a culture takes root automatically. And that is a culture which you may not be very happy with. Because that which happens incidentally, it grows like in the wild. So it is necessary that a plan be put in place that we are able to get this culture in. So right, so we come to as to what do we do in terms of developing cultures. So neither do I have the time, and I don't think you would have the inclination that we go into the details of it, but I would only like to quote one or two examples towards this. One, like I said, most organization routines are made up of habits. There are certain habits in most organizations, or in every organization, which are critical habits. These are termed as keystone habits. You change that one habit, you find it has a cascading impact on multiple domains. It virtually changes culture, and I would like to give again a very small example on this. Aluminium Company of America was a huge behemoth in the late 80s and early 90s, and they were going for the cycle was downward. They hired a new CEO from the US government who had a reputation for innovative thinking. And his first stakeholder meeting or shareholder meeting, when he was to give his vision, he said, my entire priority is to improve the safety record of alcohol. So there was a stampede of shareholders outside, many of them wanting to exit out of the company, saying there's a wrong selection made. He's not talking about profit margins, he's not talking about the books, he's talking about changing safety records. It doesn't benefit us. But the point was, this man had identified safety as a critical keystone habit which this company was failing in. And he got them, the workers on board in this, saying, my whole routine change is going to be for your benefit because we are losing or having 3 accidents a week, which is finally leading to they had an employee strength of 300,000. It was leading to loss of 1 day per worker per year that led to 300,000 days being lost per year. When they improved the safety record, they got them on board. The company within 2 years was up in the blue and then became one of the largest profit-earning organizations. The identification became critical. The identification of that keystone habit, which changes organizational culture, brings buy-in from the employees, buy-in from the management, and the whole process has been documented. So it gives a relative guide path, a roadmap as to how these things happen. Right, ultimately cultures, as goes the leadership, so goes the culture. As goes the culture, so goes the organization. So finally, leadership decides it. I don't need to dwell too much on this. It is that adaptive, analytical, creative, and as the introductory speaker said, empathetic leadership with stellar problem-solving skills remains the gold standard of company functioning. I think I've taken enough time, so though I have many more things to highlight, but I will skip that for now. I would only like to conclude, as organizations, the need is to fine-tune our responses in the face of uncertainty and challenges. The requirement is to hold on to our core values: loyalty to the purpose, leadership, discipline and functioning, professionalism, resilience, ethics, and care for employees, as highlighted by the previous speakers also. These are crucial anchors in adopting the new and discarding the old. As organizations, we grapple with a number of issues and questions. How much can we empower our subordinates, given the information-rich and dynamic environment of the present and the future? How can we constantly refine relevant skill sets of our personnel during their time with us? How do we build on basics while also pushing new frontiers on training and technology? How do we create the conditions for success, yet allow space for failure? How do we inculcate the discipline of a questioning mind while keeping people within roles and mandated tasks? How do we maximize individual creativity and potential without sacrificing system efficiency and effectiveness? When do we move fast to add greater value? Where should we stand firm and hold on to old values? So the ability to find the right balance will decide the future of organizations. Thank you so much. And my compliments and congratulations to the award winners whenever that happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think lots of food for thought, but I think an important thing to remember is what are our keystone habits more than, before we get to the organizational section. Ms. Shri-